My name is Robert Hale. I'm 52 years old, and I live in a quiet town outside Denver, Colorado. For 30 years, I worked as an engineer, raised 2 children, and never once asked my family for anything in return. I thought loyalty meant something. I thought family meant something. I was wrong. And it took a will reading, a single afternoon in a lawyer's office, to show me exactly how wrong I was. But before I tell you what happened in that room, let me take you back. Because to understand why my name being called shocked an entire family into silence, you need to understand what I gave up to get there. 25 years ago, I married my high school sweetheart, Diane. We built a modest life together, nothing extravagant, but full. We had 2 children, my son Adam and my daughter Claire. I worked long hours so they'd never want for anything. Diane stayed home, raising them with more patience than I ever had. When Diane's father, my father-in-law Walter, grew older, I was the one who drove 2 hours every weekend to check on him. I fixed his roof. I paid his heating bill more than once when his pension came up short. Adam and Claire visited sometimes, mostly on holidays. I never resented that. I told myself family shows up in its own way. Walter used to sit on his porch and tell me, "Robert, you're more of a son to me than my own." I laughed it off back then. I didn't know how much those words would matter. 3 years ago, things started changing. Walter's health declined, and suddenly Adam and Claire started visiting more often. Not out of concern, I noticed that quickly. They'd show up with expensive gifts, sit with him for exactly 1 hour, and leave. Diane didn't see it. She wanted to believe her children had simply matured, become more caring. I wanted to believe that too. But something felt off every time I saw Claire quietly photographing Walter's antique furniture, or Adam asking pointed questions about the house's value. One evening, I overheard Adam on the phone in Walter's driveway. He said, "Once the old man's gone, that property's worth at least $500,000. We just have to make sure it's split right." I told myself I misheard. I wanted to believe I misheard. Walter passed away 8 months ago, quietly, in his sleep. At the funeral, Adam and Claire cried convincingly. I stood there holding Diane, believing, still, foolishly, that grief was grief, no matter the motive behind it. 2 weeks later, we received a letter from a law firm. The will reading was scheduled. Diane assumed it would be simple, the house and savings split between her and her siblings. I assumed the same. What none of us knew was that Walter had quietly changed his will 14 months before he died, right around the time he started noticing what I had noticed. The neglect disguised as sudden affection, the interest in his belongings instead of his well-being. He never told anyone, not even Diane. The week before the reading, tension in our house grew unbearable. Adam started calling Diane, asking if she knew how things were going to be divided. Claire messaged me directly, something she rarely did, asking if I thought the house would sell fast once it was in everyone's name. I remember sitting alone in my car outside the hardware store, staring at nothing, feeling something I hadn't expected. Shame. Not for anything I'd done, but for the family I'd helped raise, a family that saw an old man's death as an opportunity instead of a loss. I called Diane that night and told her what I'd overheard in Walter's driveway all those months ago. She went silent on the phone. Then she said quietly, "I think I already knew. I just didn't want to see it." 2 days before the will reading, I got a call from a lawyer named Mr. Ferris, Walter's attorney. He asked me to come in early, alone. I assumed it was routine paperwork. It wasn't. Mr. Ferris slid a folder across his desk. "Walter updated his will 14 months ago," he said. "He asked me to speak with you privately before the family reading, because what's in here is going to surprise everyone, including you." I opened the folder. Walter had written a personal letter, dated and signed, explaining that over the last 2 years of his life, the only person who showed up without asking for anything was me. Not his daughter, not his grandchildren. Me, his son-in-law. He had left me the deciding trustee role over the entire estate, with instructions that its distribution depend on how the family treated each other, and him, in his final years. I sat there in that office, stunned, holding a truth I never expected. An old man had been watching all along, and he had trusted me with something no one in that family thought I even deserved a seat at. I want to be honest with you, my first instinct wasn't revenge. It was grief. Grief that Walter had felt so alone in his final years that a son-in-law's quiet visits meant more than his own children's presence. But as I read further, I realized this wasn't about revenge for me. It was about finally letting the truth speak for itself. Walter had built in a mechanism, not punishment, but exposure. He wanted the family to face what they had done in front of each other without me having to say a single accusing word. I didn't plan anything dramatic. I didn't need to. Walter had already done the planning. All I had to do was let the will reading happen exactly as he designed it. Mr. Ferris explained the structure carefully. The will would be read in stages. First, small keepsakes to grandchildren. Then, a modest inheritance to Diane, Adam, and Claire, enough to seem normal, enough to make them relax. Then came the final clause. The remainder of the estate, including the house, would pass into a trust, and I would be named trustee, with full authority to distribute it based on documented time, care, and involvement over Walter's final 2 years, records Walter had been quietly keeping the entire time. Visit logs, notes, even receipts for the heating bills I'd paid without ever mentioning it to anyone. I said nothing to Adam or Claire beforehand. Diane knew because I couldn't keep something like that from my wife. But she agreed. The truth needed to come out on its own terms, in that room, exactly as her father intended. The day of the reading, the office was quiet except for the sound of paper shifting. Adam sat confidently, already talking about next steps for the property. Claire kept glancing at her phone, likely already pricing furniture online. Mr. Ferris read the keepsakes, then the modest inheritances. Adam smiled, assuming the bulk was coming his way next. Then Mr. Ferris read the final clause aloud. The room went completely silent. He explained the trust, the records Walter had kept, and the name of the trustee responsible for the estate's true distribution. "Robert Hale," he said. Adam's smile disappeared. Claire's phone slipped from her hand onto the carpet. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Diane reached over and took my hand. Adam finally broke the silence. "This has to be a mistake. He's not even blood." Mr. Ferris calmly opened the folder and read one line from Walter's letter aloud. "Family isn't proven by blood. It's proven by who shows up when there's nothing to gain." I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I simply told them the truth, that Walter had watched everything, quietly, for 2 years, and that the records didn't lie. If they wanted a fair share, the path forward was simple. Show the same care going forward that they'd failed to show before. Adam stormed out. Claire stayed, and for the first time in years, she actually apologized, not performatively, but with tears that felt real. I never set out to expose anyone. I never wanted to be the man standing at the center of a family's unraveling, but Walter taught me something in his final act that I'll carry for the rest of my life. Love isn't loud, and it isn't measured in holiday visits or expensive gifts. It's measured in the quiet, unnoticed moments, the ones nobody thinks anyone is keeping track of. Someone was always watching, and in the end, the truth found its way to the surface exactly the way it always does. If you've ever felt overlooked for simply doing the right thing without asking for credit, remember this: quiet loyalty is never invisible forever.